Okay, let's go ahead and pull back the curtain here and get started with our webinar. This is our first webinar using Teams. For the past 10 years or so, we've been using WebEx, so there may be a few differences here and there. One of the differences is WebEx has a Q&A. With Teams, there is a chat on your screen there, so you can use that for any questions. I will get to questions at the end of the presentation. This uses for Power Automate presentation here is one of a series that we've done about getting the value out of your Microsoft 365 subscription. And as most of you probably know, Microsoft recently increased the pricing on many of their licenses, not all, but many. So it's more important than ever to make sure that you're getting the value out of your subscription. Unfortunately, what happens, a lot of folks will migrate to 365 and use it as an email platform, maybe start using Teams, maybe OneDrive, but rarely do they get to the point of really improving business process. And really, that's where a lot of the value is. If you're able to improve that process and implement some automation, make things happen more efficiently, more quickly, that's really how you're going to see value out of your Office 365 or your Microsoft 365 subscription. Okay, so first of all, before we get to our agenda, a little bit about us. Colden Company is an information technology service organization. We're computer guys and gals. Been in business since 2003, so we're coming up on 19 years. We have offices in St. Augustine, Florida, which is where I'm talking to you from today, as well as Ballston Spa, New York, and Jonesville, Michigan. And our customer footprint extends out 17 states, including outside the US as well. Now, we are a Microsoft partner. We do have what's called their Silver Competency for Cloud Solutions, which is where Microsoft 365 falls into place there. So that's pertinent to today's presentation. And last but not least, we're repeat winners of the MSP 501 award, which is an independent organization that ranks managed service providers like us worldwide. So they pick the top 501 across the world, not just a US thing here, although there's reportedly, according to Channel Futures, up to 40,000 MSPs in the US alone. So we're proud to not only be in the top 501, but came in third place for their MSP of the Year award, which is like their best picture at the Oscars type of thing. But enough about us. Let's get to our agenda. So we're going to talk about what is Power Automate. We're going to talk about uses for Power Automate. Pretty simple agenda. We'll get to some questions at the end. Now, what this is not a tutorial on how to create Power Automate flows. We're not going to be getting into the nitty-gritty of how to actually create your own Power Automate flows. We were going to focus more on the uses for Power Automate and how businesses can utilize Power Automate. If you listen to the Microsoft mantra, they talk about Power Automate is easy and simple. It's not as easy as it sounds. There's a little bit of technical skill needed to fully utilize Power Automate. So we're going to focus more on the business use cases. Okay, so we've had Power Automate presentations in the past, so we'll breeze through this fairly quickly here. Power Automate is a service that helps you create automated workflows between your favorite apps and services. You can synchronize files, get notifications, collect data, and more. So I added the cloud-based in there. Technically, there is a Power Automate desktop, but the interface that we were going to be showing today and use mostly is cloud-based. Formerly known as Microsoft Flow, it was renamed now, gosh, it was November of 2019, so it's been a couple of years here since they've renamed it. You'll understand why it was formerly called Flow and why they have renamed it on the next slide here. So Power Automate is a component of the Microsoft 365 Power series. They have Power BI, business intelligence for data analytics. They have Power Apps for application development, and now Power Automate for process automation. You can see how that fits better with their Power series than having it called Flow. There are different types of flows that you can create within Power Automate. There are automated flows. Well, we're going to spend some time looking at those. So automated flows basically kick in when there is a trigger for some type of event. This event happens, then this action happens. And it happens automatically. So that's the automated flow. An instant flow is something that you can kick off. So let's say you want to gather information out of a database or a spreadsheet on an on-demand basis. You can have a flow set up that you just run whenever you want. And that's called an instant flow. And then scheduled flow is what you would think it is it runs on a particular schedule. There's also a fourth type that we're not really going to get into here. Those are called business process flows. Business process flows basically provide a guide for people to get their work done. So it's basically you input essentially all the steps in a business process and have it recorded essentially. But we're going to focus mostly on the automated flows because that's really where you're going to gain a lot of your value. So automated flows have a particular flow to it. So, that's why it was originally called flow. As we mentioned, there's a trigger of some type of event that triggers an action. If you think back to, writing code, if you're a coder, the old if then else, if this happens, then do this, or else do this. That's what the if then else was in the programming world. And it's very similar here. We'll actually break from PowerPoint in a little bit and show you that real briefly. So the flows have a trigger, which results in an action, and there are conditions. So the conditions determine which action to take. Okay, so that is Power Automate in a nutshell. If we want to look at the uses for Power Automate, there are three that we're going to pick on today. We're going to show how Power Automate can help with notifications. We're going to show approval processes and APIs, which are application programming interfaces, think integrations. So let's start off with notifications. So here's an example of what notifications are possible with Power Automate. Perhaps you want to receive a Teams pop-up when a certain event is triggered. And I've got here on the screen here an example or a picture of what that Teams pop-up looks like. If you're at all familiar with Teams and you've used the chat or the instant message component of it, that's what happens, right? It pops up in the corner. Hey, there's a message here. It's not limited to instant messaging. You can have those things pop up when an event is triggered. Let's say you want to know when a particular spreadsheet is updated, or maybe when there's a new file saved in a SharePoint library. Now, previously, a couple months ago, we did a webinar specifically for the HVAC industry and talked about uses for Teams and Power Automate for the HVAC world. And we talked about creating specific SharePoint libraries for your customers or maybe for your vendors. So maybe you want to know when a vendor populates or uploads an invoice to your site. Maybe you want to know when customers upload new pictures of their site. Maybe they're making changes and they want to show you pictures and you want to know instantly. Power Automate can help do that. So the point of this slide really is to let you know that notifications can happen in more than just email. They can happen in Teams as well. So perhaps you want to receive an email alert when a new file is added to SharePoint. I guess we just talked about that in the last slide. Or maybe receive an email alert when a Microsoft plan is updated, if you're a Microsoft Planner user. Perhaps when a file is modified in OneDrive. Maybe you're the keeper of a shared spreadsheet in OneDrive and you want to know when someone modifies it. You can get those notifications. I've got those listed as email alerts. Of course, they can be Teams alerts as well. Maybe you're the owner of a particular team and you want to know when there's any modifications made to that team. All these things are examples of things that are possible with Power Automate in terms of notifications. One more. Perhaps if you're using Microsoft Lists and you want to know when a list has been updated. A lot of folks are not really very familiar with Microsoft Lists, so I'm going to talk about that very briefly here. What I've got here is a list of different types of template lists that Microsoft provides. Lists are great for displaying information, maybe in different ways, options that maybe you don't have in Excel. So a lot of times I get the question, what's really the difference between lists and Excel? Well, like Excel could be the right tool sometimes, and maybe a better tool than lists in certain cases. It really depends. So you want to make sure you're using the right tool for the right job. The nice thing about lists is there's some integration there with Power Automate where you can set up some automation. You can display your data in different ways at the click of a button. Those are things that are not easy to do in Excel. But if you're doing, heavy calculations, things like that, Excel is probably still the right tool. So here are some examples of some templates that you can use with lists. Issue trackers, employee onboarding templates, maybe an asset manager, work in progress tracker. So if you were to choose one of these templates to start a list, Microsoft is going to pre-populate some of the fields there. And we'll actually break from PowerPoint here for a second. And we're going to show you some of this. Okay. So what I've done, I've logged into office.com. And I went up here into the list of apps and I chose Microsoft Lists. So why don't I start from scratch here? And you can see here, I've got a few lists here. I've made a couple of them my favorites because they're ones that I'm going to talk about today here. And we'll click on this employee onboarding list. This was created from that template that I showed on the last slide. Now I'm having to fill in the different tasks here. But Microsoft provided the structure for this list. So I can build out my employee onboarding template, and it already has pre-populated things. This needs to be completed before joining. Is it complete? Those types of things. Where lists may have an advantage over an Excel spreadsheet, as an example, is how you show that. If I want to show this a little bit differently, these are cards, I guess is how they're called. And you can look at the different tasks and that type of a view, or you can go back to your list view. One of the reasons we're showing lists here is look what this says up here, automate. It's got some built-in integration with Power Automate. I want to set reminders for when something is due, or I want to create a new rule using Power Automate. So it's giving you kind of a shortcut to Power Automate right here from inside lists. One of the things I want to talk about here, if I want to change one of these things, okay, this person actually did not sign their letter. They got everything else. We checked it complete, but it's really not. If I want to update this, there's a couple ways to do it. First of all, what I'd have to do is edit this, come down and say, no, that's not complete, and then save. That's a little cumbersome. So what I recommend is if you're working with one of these is go into grid view, edit in grid view. Then once you're in grid view, then it becomes as easy as clicking like you're in an Excel spreadsheet. So just keep that in mind, that the grid view can really help you. So perhaps, for example, your HR manager wants to know when this task is complete. You can set up automation, Power Automate, to send those types of alerts. Okay, so that was just one example of a list. If I go back to my list, I also have an asset manager here. For those of you that have attended previous webinars of ours, you may be familiar with our Project Mercury, which is something we often reference for our webinars. And this is a list that I actually showed in one of our webinars from Teams. So that's more integration. And in fact, I can show you that quickly here. If I go into our Project Mercury webinar, you can see this asset manager here. It's the same thing. It's really just linked to that Microsoft list. So it's the same information. Okay, and again, if I want to edit it, I can go into kind of grid view here. But again, these were created using the templates that Microsoft is providing. Okay, so this is a Power Automate webinar, right? Not a Microsoft list. So I want to get over to Power Automate here. Bring that up here. And I'm going to click into My Flows. And I'm going to send an email when a file is added to Teams here. So if I actually edit this particular flow, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty here too much, but I do want to point out the kind of if this, then do this. So this is my trigger here. So when a new document, when a file is created in this particular folder. So in the example that I used in the previous webinar for HVAC, we talked about maybe you want your technicians to be able to upload pictures of a site. And maybe somebody in the office wants to know when they do that. So I had created a technician group in a team, a folder called Send to Office, and then a folder for each of my techs. And using myself as the example here, when Jim Lapointe uploads new documents into his team site, then send somebody an email. In this case, since I'm sending it to myself just because I'm doing the webinar here, but you can configure this. So this is what I'm talking about here. This is actually how you build a Power Automate flow. And again, we're not going to get into too much detail because it is fairly complex. There's a lot of different fields that you can pull in to your email and how you want it to look. But all this information needs to be populated. And one of the things you'll notice is it's easier to get the value out of Power Automate when you're taking full advantage of the Microsoft stack of programs, when you're using SharePoint, when you're using lists and those other things. When you've pre-populated the Azure Active Directory with all this information, it becomes a lot easier to use it. Otherwise, if you don't have a lot of this information filled out, then you don't have job title filled out in Microsoft site. If you want to use that, there's no data there. So that's what we were talking about in the beginning. Although Microsoft makes it sound very easy to create your own Power Automate flows, there is a little bit of work involved to it. Okay, so in any event, that's what an actual flow would look like. But I want to show you a few more things here. I want to go into templates. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to give everybody an action item, and that is to actually go into templates here and look, because that's how you're going to see what types of things Power Automate can do. And think about that with your business in mind, of course. And just look through some of these already built flows, essentially. Now they're partially built. You have to fill out your specific information. But take a look. Do you save email attachments from Outlook.com directly to Dropbox? Create a task in Planner based on a calendar event in Outlook. Notify about rows in a SQL database. There's tons and tons and tons of these templates. You can click on more here and get a whole nother screen, and keep going for several screens here. Maybe you want to automatically forward emails into a particular channel in Teams. Alert me when I'm mentioned in Microsoft Teams. Lots of things. So I think this will really help people understand what types of things they can do with Power Automate is by going through these templates that other people have found useful and Microsoft has included in the templates. So that's going to be a takeaway for everybody to do that. The second takeaway is to go into connectors. And the connectors are integrations. So I scroll down here, I'm going to go to all connectors. You can see all the different applications that Microsoft Power Automate integrates with. They integrate with Teams and Planner and Twitter and SQL Server, GitHub, Slack, YouTube. If you take a look through this, that will also give you some ideas of things you can do with Power Automate. Now you will notice at some point some of these say premium. Salesforce, that basically means it's not free, that you have to pay for that, that connector. But it's the second thing that we're going to ask people to do is look through here and see what kind of integrations are available. Okay, down here, Process Advisor is new since the last time we talked about Power Automate. This is also a premium function. You'll notice here it says start your trial. It's not free, so I won't spend too much time on it. The idea, though, behind it, just since it's new, is you would input basically your business process, and then Power Automate would analyze it for you and say, hey, these are automations that might make sense for this particular business process. And last but not least, learn. If you want to learn about getting started with Power Automate, how to create flows, they have a great set of tools here. That's how I started, really, just watching some of these videos. It's a pretty robust set of tools here and videos that Microsoft is giving you to get started with, if you're interested in actually creating your own flows. Okay, so let's get back to our presentation here. And I think we've hammered notifications pretty well. Let's talk about approvals. So perhaps you want to automatically route an invoice to an appropriate person for approval. Again, on our last Power Automate webinar, we went through this in detail, so I won't go through that in grave detail here. But it is pretty handy. The way we had it set up is when an invoice comes into a particular email address, so basically what it would do, it would scan for emails coming to a particular mailbox, accounts payable at coldencompany.com as an example. If it had an attachment, it would automatically save that attachment into a folder in Teams. And then it would automatically send this email, and you can see here, hey, please approve this. And you can change the verbiage if you want. But you can see here, this please approve this document, that's a link. So the recipient would actually be able to click on that and open the invoice directly, look at it and decide if they want to approve it or not, and approve it by clicking the approve or reject down below. It will also give you a chance to add comments. So if you reject an invoice, you can say why, and it gives you a chance to do that. Another nice thing about Power Automate approvals is it gives you the ability to determine when you're setting it up, do I want approvals to be where everybody in the distribution list has to approve it, or just one? So maybe you're sending something to the executive team and you need all of the members to sign off on something, or maybe you just need one person to sign off on it. So you get that choice. You also get a nice log, so it shows you all the different things that were approved and when. So that's kind of nice to be able to go back and see the history of what's been approved and what hasn't. More examples of approvals. An HR time off request that automatically routes the employee request to the appropriate manager. That is also something we showed in a previous webinar here. Perhaps you want to have sales and marketing material approved before getting sent out. Those are all examples of ways to use approvals. And here's kind of a list of a Microsoft form here that we created for the time off. So this was available in Teams. So this was really an integration of Teams, Microsoft Forms, Microsoft Power Automate, Microsoft Lists, this particular project. The employee would enter the dates that they want off, how many hours, and the published one in Teams would have a submit here where it says add new, it would be submit. And then it would automatically route to that person's manager based on to what we had filled out in Azure Active Directory. And they would get the notification and be able to approve or reject that person's time off. It would in turn save that request into a Microsoft list, so you had a nice running tally of all the requests for time off and what was approved and what wasn't for HR. Nice use of Power Automate there. Okay, finally, the last one was examples of APIs, or application programming interfaces, again, integrations. Perhaps you want to be alerted when you get a new like on your Facebook page. Maybe you want to auto tweet when a new video is posted to YouTube. That's something that we had done here at Colden Company. Whenever I uploaded a new video to our YouTube channel, it would automatically tweet it out. Hey, check out our new video. Integration with Eventbrite. Maybe you want to auto create an Eventbrite event whenever a Microsoft list is updated. So again, we're going to ask you to look through those connectors to see which of those things maybe your company is using and see how those connectors and Power Automate may be able to improve your business process. Okay, wrapping up here. Power Automate has many uses for improving business process automation. Microsoft provides some great templates for common workflows to get you started. And we're going to leave you today with a couple of action items. Think about how Power Automate can streamline your operations. Look at those templates. Look at those connectors. That's what I want everyone to do, is look at that and see what might benefit your business. And then if you believe that Power Automate can benefit your business, schedule a consultation with us. We can review that with you and let you know what's possible. Okay, if you're running your business the same way you were 2 or 3 years ago, you're not staying the same, you're falling behind. That's a quote that we always end with. And that has to do both with technology here. It's been shown there's a Forbes study that showed businesses that embrace technology outperform those that do not. And rest assured, if you're not keeping up, your competition is. All right, so we'll take a couple of questions here. And while we're doing that, I'll put my contact information up on the screen here. So if we can help in any way, please call us or email us, and we'll be happy to help here. Okay, first question, what Microsoft subscription do I need for Power Automate? So really any business subscription. So if you have a personal Microsoft account, you're not going to get that. But pretty much all the business subscriptions, Business Basic, Business Standard, Business Premium, those are going to include Power Automate. Now, one caveat is we have found that there is a upper cap, I guess, on the free version of Power Automate, or the included version. There's only a certain number of flows that can run, but it's a really, really high number. So we haven't had anybody need to pay for the professional version. Second question is do we teach Power Automate coding? We do not. We can build flows for you, but we do not currently teach Power Automate coding. Feel free to use the chat feature if you have any more questions. But if not, you can always reach out to me after the fact. We're always happy to help. That's our job. And again, our goal here is to make sure that our customers are getting the full value out of their subscription with Microsoft here. Okay, it's 11:30, so thank you all for joining today. Appreciate everyone taking time out of their busy days, and have a great day.